สวัสดีครับใจเนิร์ด
Yo. Hmong-ish is a podcast produced by Hmong American Media and sponsored by the Hmong Organizing for Progress and Empowerment Center, or the Hope Center, along with Culture Through Cloth. Hey everyone, I'm your host Pachia.
And I'm your host Shoun.
And we are Hmong-ish. So Hmong-ish is a podcast where Shoun and I talk about everything and all things Hmong, diving into our own experiences of what it means to be Hmong American and Hmong today in today's time and world.
Definitely. And so I'm excited. Are you excited?
Yes.
So what are we discussing today?
So today we're going to be talking about Laos, and more specifically our own travels to Laos.
Ooh, Laos. Interesting country.
So Laos, for those of you who don't know, is a country located in Southeast Asia. It's a landlocked country, so unlike Thailand or Vietnam, they don't have access to the ocean, but they are kind of like squeezed right in between.
5 nations. So.
Yeah, and so the Hmong have been there for around 250 years now. I think
about 300 years.
Yeah, I wanted to say like now 300.
Yeah.
Because those 50 years went by fast. But we started migrating. Like when I talk to my grandparents and stuff, they can still remember the migration coming from Vietnam.
Definitely similar experience. Like my grandparents and them, they could trace back like 2, 3, 4 generations.
Yeah.
And so you times that by like 40, 50 years, and that's probably like 100 years. And so around 1800s.
We're not the only, like ethnic group in Laos. There's like lots and lots of different ethnic groups in Laos. And so we're going to be talking about a bit more like my travels there. But when I did go there, I learned about how ethnically diverse Laos is. And so the Hmong are the 3rd largest population. But there's also like 49 other official ethnic groups, which comprise of over 160 ethnicities, which is just wild. I think it's one of the most diverse countries in Southeast Asia, not including like the Pacific Islands.
So this is interesting because compared to China, they call it nationalities. In Laos, do they call it nationalities too, or they call it
ethnic minorities? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I think, if you're Hmong and you live in America, like 99.5% of the time, you probably came from Laos. Like, your family came from Laos.
So, Pachia, I know you spent the most time in Laos out of both of us, so I just want to know, why did you travel to Laos?
Yeah, so I traveled to Laos in 2017, which was about, 5 years ago?
Wow, yeah.
6 years ago?
A long time, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to work, actually. I think, after I graduated from college, I was trying to, figure out... I majored in anthropology, and then I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do? I was working for different nonprofits and doing a bunch of different stuff. But I was like, I want to keep doing my stuff on Pandao and on Hmong textiles. And so I looked it up, and I just was like, why don't I just see if there's any Hmong textile jobs, randomly? Why would there be anything like that? But there were jobs that, in Laos that, there are, small startups and social enterprises working with Hmong artisans in Laos. And so I started, learning more about these businesses out there. And I came across the Traditional Arts and Ethnology Center, which was where I ended up interning for. But originally, I wanted to do a Fulbright scholarship, or a Fulbright fellowship with them. I wanted to do the National Geographic one, but I didn't get it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get it, but they were like, "Hey, it's fine. Just come. So whenever you're ready to come, just come." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure. I can come." So, we just scheduled out a time, and I was supposed to be there for 3 months. But I ended up extending my stay for 6 months.
Wow.
And I think they wanted me to stay too, but I think there was just too much going on, and I feel like if I stayed...
So you lived in Laos. You didn't travel in Laos. You lived in Laos.
So I think if I stayed, I wonder sometimes how different my life would have been if I stayed and worked in Laos. But, it was a very, enriching experience. I grew a lot from it. And like before I went, yeah, like talking about stigma, before I went, everyone was super scared for me, right? So that was my initial like introduction, like how everyone responded to me about going to Laos. Like I talked about how my grandma was like, life is never going to be what it was before in the past. Like you don't need to go and search for something like that. Like let's just move on. Which was kind of like a sharp reality check for me because I'm very romantic and I'm like, oh. But then you know, when I was going, then like other relatives, like some of my other grandmas were like, hey, like you need to be careful, people go out there and they get killed, and like you need to be careful where you eat, because I actually had an aunt who had passed away and they had like Lomosha, and it was like that, you know, maybe she might have gotten poisoned when she was studying abroad.
Wow.
And so, you know, there were a lot of these types of like theories around safety and health and stuff. And people go out there and they disappear, and you know, like all of that's a real reality. Like I think we've talked about how it's kind of like the wild, wild west out there sometimes.
Right? Sometimes it is.
So yeah.
I think for me, you know, I went to Laos because I right after college, I worked for a campaign, and so and my boss, he won election, and so he was like, I want to know more about your people, Sean.
That's great.
Use your resources, connections. Let's set up a trip to Laos, right? And so he's like, I'm willing to pay for it. So we didn't use city funding. So we, you know, it was a private trip. But, you know, I kind of used my leverage at the city for connection. So what I did was like, I was 24 years old as well, 2005. And I just wrote to the U.S. Embassy. I said, hi, this is Sean from the city of Sacramento.
Yeah.
We want to plan a trip to Laos, and my council member put his violin there.
Right.
And we want to visit A, B, C, and D. And then they're like, okay, when you guys come here, you guys have to meet with us first. So I put, you know, I coordinated that trip. So we, and then it's
and
interesting
Laos is
too.
just one stop, right?
Laos just, no. So we went to Thailand, Laos, Vietnam.
Okay, so you guys did travel
Yes.
throughout Southeast Asia.
Yes, we did travel through Southeast Asia, and you know, but then more of Laos is where we engaged more with the government,
Okay.
and so it was pretty interesting to be at that top level and meet the policymakers in Laos, and so in my trip in 2014 we went right. I was only there for 4 days, but then I mean we traveled by ourselves, and then we met folks. Well, when we got there, we met with the embassy first, and you know they just taught us about the protocols, like you know you're traveling international, you're meeting with officials, and it's different from how you would meet with other people, you know, and so you just learn all these
Wow. It's great
international
that they,
etiquette.
gave
Yeah.
you that.
Yeah, because I think you know we took a public official from the United States, and we don't want to embarrass the United States, right? So it became like an official delegation trip.
Yeah, but they do have their own like
protocols.
etiquette and protocols and stuff.
And so it's interesting because during that time, my boss was the vice mayor, and so everybody we met when we went to Vientiane, we met the vice governor of Vientiane. When we went to Pont Savan, which is Sinh Quang province, we met the vice governor of Sinh Quang province. And so it's interesting that you learn like, oh, okay, when you're overseas and you have a certain rank, they put some a certain rank with you and you guys meet. Like you would see how presidents meet one-on-one. Yeah, so we had table talks, talk like that, and we share information, and you learn so much about the country. Like before going to Laos, I always knew that the country was, you know, underdeveloped, and sometimes your parents said there's certain stigma about the country being like, oh, it's never going to change, and the people there's not going to do anything for it. But then when you meet these people, these policymakers, and they are trying to do their best, and they're doing the best out of their own capability.
Right.
But I mean, basically it's not working. But they're trying their best,
They're
you know?
trying their best. They're doing what they can with the resources that they have.
Yes. And so that's what I learned, and you know, I grew to respect that.
Yeah.
Based on the resources you have and based on your playing field, this is what you have to work with, and this is the best you can do. I mean, you can do better, but who am I to judge you? Because I'm not in your shoes.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's very interesting. Yeah. And then we met, we also met like Americans who's doing business there.
Oh, cool.
And then it's very funny because one of the one of the best hotel in Vientiane, which is they call it like, oh, it's an American brand, is Best Western Hotel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, wait, Best Western is not one of the high ends. It's not Hilton or it's not, but it's the only American brand that's in Laos. And I was like, oh, cool, they have a Best Western Hotel.
There's not. Okay, so it's funny because before I went to Laos, I was in Thailand. And I was meeting with friends who were working there teaching English, and I think one of her friends made a comment like, it was kind of a weird comment because they were like, oh, they don't want to teach in Thailand anymore because it's too Western here. They want to go teach in a country that doesn't have any Western influence. And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? But then, like, when I flew into Laos, I'm like, oh, stark difference. Not many brands, like, not many global brands, right? Because in Thailand, like, there's a 7-Eleven on every corner.
Yeah.
But in Laos, like, you could not, like, I could not find any, like, big, like, corporations at all.
Yeah.
Chain corporations. Like, I think on the way out of Laos, maybe I found, like, a hot dog food stand or something, and I was like, wait, is this Dairy Queen's? I don't know, maybe I'm making that up, maybe it was in Vietnam or somewhere else, but I just remember like thinking like, oh, this is the first one that I've seen.
When I was in Laos and went to the night market, right? It was that night market next to the Mekong River in Vientiane.
In Vientiane. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was so shocked that when you go there, all of the young people setting up shop there.
Yeah.
So it's like a flea market. And
Yeah.
But there's so many young Hmong people setting up shop there, right?
Yeah, so it's like this beautiful, like, so the Mekong River
Yes.
Goes right through Vientiane, and then like there's this really nice area that they've marked off to do a night market.
Yes.
I think they have some new developments, but I don't know. But sorry, just to explain what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you guys ever go to Vientiane, go to that night market, you'll see a lot of young Hmong people there. But there's like students there selling their books, and just so you guys know, Vientiane don't have a lot of Hmong people living there. Vientiane is the capital of Laos, and so Hmong is like, it'd be rare to see Hmong people there. But if you go to Vientiane and then you go to the night market, I was so shocked. I saw Hmong people there, and then there was this, like you said, there's no 7-Eleven, there's no corporate chain there, but there was this pizza startup that was 2 Hmong girls running a pizza startup, and I was like, wow, they're making pizza here. Like, this is the real hustle.
I saw
here.
the same thing when I went to St. Quang.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if you've ever been to Laos, and many of you may not have, so there's a great night market in Vientiane, like you're talking about. The Luang Prabang night market is even more amazing. Like, it's a UNESCO World Heritage town, so like everyone flocks to it. But the night market in St. Quang is very sad.
Oh yeah,
because they don't have a lot of money or resources out there, and so there's only like a very few vendors. And I was so shocked because there were these 2 Hmong guys who had built this like tiny like startup, like fast food joint thing. And they were making takoyaki. And I was just like, whoa, like, this is amazing. You know, this looks like something you'd see in the street of Tokyo. And it's so cool that it's just these 2 young Hmong guys who've just been super ingenious and, you know, bought a takoyaki machine. And now they're just out here selling takoyaki. But I don't know if anyone's buying it because nobody's here.
Right.
And, you know, I bought a bunch of takoyaki from them. But it is really nice to see that. Those types of...
Because my stigma when I went there, I was like, okay, probably not going to see any young people. Country's going to be very controlled.
Like your thoughts.
Yeah.
Like
and since we're going as a delegation, they're going to give us the red carpet. So it's going to be like, you know, a country. But, I mean, we're given the freedom to travel and do all that, interact with the people. I went to my dad's brother's village and met with our cousins there. And then, you know, I think just interacting with the people and knowing that, like, you know, they face everyday struggles. Now, yes, there are corruption there. I'm not going to deny it. But there's systems in place. It's not there, but I think the country is trying to meet all the standards that's given to them by the United Nations to be considered a developed countries by certain times, and it's going to take a while. But I'm rooting that they will get there.
They will.
In 2030. Yeah.
We both went to like a few different places in Laos, but like, what were some of your first impressions about Laos or like each different city that we went to and stuff?
So I've traveled to China before, so I kind of knew what to expect. But then,
which was what? Curious. What does that mean?
Which was expect the unexpected.
Okay.
Yeah. So like have thick skin,
Yeah, that's true.
And that's my thing when traveling abroad is have thick skin because you're gonna experience some things that you don't understand.
That's true.
But then I think what prepared me for Laos was Thailand.
Okay.
Because we landed in Thailand and we spent 2 days in Thailand. And then we went to Pattaya, which is a tourist town.
Right.
Yeah, and so, Pattaya was very vibrant, a lot of foreigners. And echoing back to what you say, it's different. It's a Western influence. And so it was humid too. The weather was crazy.
So
yeah.
That is such a different experience. You just get off the plane and like...
Yeah. and when we got to Vientiane, it was humid, it was hot. But I could appreciate the difference between Thailand and Laos. I think Laos is a very tranquil nation.
Thailand's very busy.
Everything's very slow, and you move at your own pace. Like in Thailand, I feel like you're rush. And in Laos, it's like, I'm gonna do this.
Thailand and China are
slow.
so busy. When we had gone to Kunming, and then I came back to Laos, I just felt this instant like relief, like, oh God, I'm so happy to be back here. It's so calm and nice. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, Kunming has the population of Kunming, which I can't remember now. I was literally like, there's more people.
There's 20, 25
million?
million?
There's more people in this one city than there are in all of Laos. Yeah. And I'm so happy to be back in Laos because it's just so calm.
Yeah, there's 6 million, around 6-7 million people in Laos right now. And that's just a fraction of what's in Kunming.
For me, like traveling there as a Hmong American was super interesting because I'm a tourist. And so I sort of have this like white privilege because I'm American.
I feel that too, yeah.
But then you go and then, you Munji Hmong and you kind of see like where they are, the things that they're struggling with, and you identify with that and you feel for that. And so it's kind of weird. Like, I think I've come to, like, understand who I am a lot more, too. But, like, at that time and age when I was, like, 24, 25, like, figuring out who I was and then going there, it was also very weird to be a Hmong American in Southeast Asia. Like, in Thailand, in Laos, in Vietnam. Like, it was just a very weird phenomenon. Like, you are one of them, but you're also not one of them.
I think that's true. I feel that too. It was a very humbling experience, and but then you go there and you're like, okay, I could feel where they're coming from, but I don't belong here too. Like you're like, okay, now I appreciate America more, and it's like, okay, now I understand what you guys are going through too, because you're learning another language, you're trying to succeed in a country as a minority, and they experience everything we do, but they don't have the privilege we have in America. Where we can
so many more opportunities.
Yeah, where we could choose to do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have the freedom to travel the world. They don't.
I lived primarily in Luang Prabang. So for me,
and if you guys, and just to interject, if you guys don't know, Luang Prabang is the original capital of the Kingdom of Laos.
Yes.
So the Kingdom of Lang Sang their capital was in Luang Prabang. So that's why it's a UNESCO World Heritage because it's.
Because all of the architecture is still original. The palace that the king lived in is still there. The roads are still those same brick roads.
Yes. So it's a very touristy, very vibrant city. Very old, picturesque.
Old, beautiful.
And Vientiane is the modern capital, which was set up by the French. So if you guys don't know, the French colonized Laos and Southeast Asia, and they set up Vientiane as the modern capital. And
so Vientiane is full of skyscrapers and big buildings for like businesses.
And they have their own Arc de Triomphe. So,
they do. Yeah,
they call it.
I've seen that. I don't know what they call it.
I think they call it I forgot what it's called. Yeah, I forgot
But
what it's
people
called.
can drive
Yeah.
around it and
But
stuff
there's a
like
joke though.
that.
There's a
What was
joke.
the
So if you want to catch Hmong American men who goes
Oh
on
my
date
God.
there, you just go sit at that Arc de Triomphe, and then you'll see. You'll be like, oh, you see, you see, you see, you see. Yeah, you do.
So
You see
you don't see,
that?
okay, that is, okay, you don't see a lot of that stuff in Luang Prabang, but the thing is, like, that's what I was saying, like, in Luang Prabang, I lived in this fantasy, like, paradise, and so when I started traveling out, like, to Vientiane and to Sengkuang, I started seeing all this stuff, and realizing, like, oh my gosh, I live in a paradise, and I don't think I even get to see the real Laos.
Yeah, because Hmong people live in Luang Prabang, but not that many. Like my mom's side, right? The Lees, they're originally from Luang Prabang and Sanyambari, right?
Yeah, but
And
they
so,
wouldn't even have lived in
and
the
cap
city
is
of
Luang
Luang
Prabang,
Prabang.
because
Like,
that's
they
a Lao
live
capital.
on the
Yeah,
outskirts.
correct.
So, like, for me, like, originally, I had lived outside of the city, and it was like a 30-minute bike ride from my workplace, which is in the heart of the city.
You rode your bike
I had to
in
ride.
the humid?
Yes, like with everyone else, like with all the cars, with all the motorbikes, even with like the cows and stuff, like on the road. And so I would have to bike in every morning. And that first week, I got so sick because on that road into the city, like
It's part of the smog.
every morning,
Yeah.
like all the cars probably emit smog
Yeah.
and the motorbikes.
Probably diesel.
And then
Yeah.
yes, and then like everyone gets up early to like burn wood for their stoves, so because they can open up their like noodle shop or they make breakfast or something. So the air quality is just terrible. And I remember just like getting to work and then blowing my nose and like soot comes out of my nose. So I had to start wearing a mask, which helped a lot. But that was just such a such an interesting experience to have to like bike into work. Eventually, like after like a month and a half, 2 months, I found a place in the city, which made things so much nicer. But yeah, like it's kind of interesting because how Luang Prabang is set up is there's the I guess you would call it like the town center, like the city center,
Yeah.
which is built around the palace with all these like nice touristy spots, like the museum I worked at, and other spots where you can then go and see the Mekong, like beautiful Buddhist temples and stuff like that, like really delicious restaurants. So there's that, and then once you start moving out from that, like you start seeing more residential living, and so for the residential living, like the Mohua separate villages, like Ban, like
yeah,
Ban
Ban,
I, Ban
yeah,
Nom, Ban Khotinang,
Yeah.
And so that's
where we
kind
got-
of how
That's where we got Ban Vinai.
Ban, Ban
from
means
Ban
village.
Vinai.
Yeah. So the city is kind of cut up into these small villages or neighborhoods. I think of it like Sacramento
Districts,
City.
maybe,
Yeah,
the
like Sacramento
districts,
City,
yeah.
and then we have our zip
Neighborhood,
codes.
yeah.
But it's just a little bit more intimate than that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different how it's set up. Yeah, because when we're in Laos, like I'm saying, we're my boss was during that time he held the title of vice mayor, right? And so they met him with the vice governor. Like I would think they would give him the vice mayor of the city, but they gave him we met with the vice mayor of the province.
That's
Yeah,
so
and
but
so-
because Mona, we always live in the rural parts, and so it's kind of weird because as a part of like one of my projects I was doing, I was going to find a tsikeng who can make teng instrument to help them learn more about that for their exhibit. But so we were like going to different villages or ban to talk to people to try to locate a person, and it was so crazy because the town is so beautiful, but then like it was weird. We went up to this one village, and like it was just this road up the hill, and then literally it became literally a village, like literally like.
What you see in the movies?
Yes, what you see in the movie. I was like, what the heck? Like, this is not even 5-minute drive from town. But you would never see that. But it's right there, like, hidden behind, like, a few trees, you know? So I think stuff like that is just very fascinating. I don't know.
Did you
Just
go
like
to
the stark differences between this huge town.
Did you go to Sengkuang? Sengkuang's like that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did
In
go to
Pon
Sengkuang.
Savan. If you guys don't know, the majority of Hmong people live in Pon Savan. And
Pon
so
Savan.
majority of Hmong live in Sengkuang province. There you go. And Sengkuang province is where the plain of jars are. and that's where most of the fighting for the war
Yeah, a
took
lot of the
place
fighting
there.
happened there.
Yes, and so in two provinces, there's a new province now called Saisumbuan province. And Saisumbuan province is where Longjiang is, and Saisumbuan and Xinguang is where the majority of Hmong people live. It's interesting to go to that province and talk to the officials there, and learn about the first you learn about just everyday life there, and I was just shocked that there's a lot of Hmong people there. Like they have the biggest Hmong New Year there.
Oh
The
yeah.
biggest Hmong New Year in
I
Laos
missed
is
that
in
New Year
Phongsalan.
by 2 days, but even then, there were still people there.
Yeah.
There, it happened at their fairgrounds
Uh-huh.
too. So yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that.
So the biggest Hmong
And they
New Year
also,
is
by the
there.
way, have like what are those like fairground rides, like
The Ferris wheel.
yeah, they have a
Yeah.
Ferris wheel that you can go on
Yeah,
too.
but I wouldn't recommend that except for that. I can't speak on that, but Americans,
Just
we're
saying.
big. Americans, we're big. I don't know if
Oh
we'll
my
hold
gosh,
our weight.
Hmong New Year in Laos is so intense. It's so loud. Did you go?
No, I haven't gone to New
It's
Year's
so
yet. Yeah.
so loud, like so incredibly loud. Like you think our New Year's is loud? No, like they play like two vendors next to each other playing songs at the same time, like super super loud. It's crazy.
And it's competition. Whoever plays the loudest gets the most people to buy their CDs, I guess, or videos. But then, yeah, and then we met with the vice governor of Phongsalan, and he was telling me, and what I learned from this trip is that, wow, like how the system's set up, they have a hard time making a profit in that province from collecting taxes, and so that's how it's so hard for the government to sustain itself, or for even the people. And so you learn, you're like, wow, like this even though the country is so the way it is, it's tough for them to modernize because there's not enough investment. And so what they were telling us is that
And it's dangerous there because
Yeah.
of all of the unexploded ordnance.
Yes.
I feel like that's the
and
number one
that's
barrier
where-
to development.
Yes, and so they're always looking for Hmong Americans or foreign investment in that area. And the gist is they say there's a lot of Hmong people here. You guys should come back and really look at this. And then that is true. Xinjiang province is important because all the unexploded ordnance. So during the war, the U.S. dropped so many bombs
Like
in
a
Laos.
ton, or like literally like 1 million ton or something.
Yeah, I
crazy
think there was
that.
like a saying that they dropped more bombs in Laos than they dropped in World War II. Yeah, and so they have.
Which is just so sad.
Yeah.
Because literally, when you go to Sengguang, you will see people walking around like without limbs
Yeah.
because of the unexploded ordnance.
in the
Because the
fields.
bombs that they dropped, obviously they would explode, but some don't explode, and so they just stay lodged in the ground. And so, like when
Yeah.
they garden or if they're trying to like clear an
Walia,
area,
yeah.
if they're trying to clear an area to build a home or something, then if they hit that bomb that never exploded, boom.
Yeah.
And
the
when I was
shrapnel,
there, when I was there, so they have various organizations working. So I visited one when I was there, and some of the stories just like really left an impact on me. Like one story was a husband and wife, and they had actually there was a bomb underneath their stove, like their hearth, where they cooked, and like they had used that for a really really long time, like years, and nothing ever happened. But then one day, I guess the bomb just decided like something happened, and the bomb just decided to blow up. So they were all around the fire, like cooking dinner, and the bomb just blew up. And so the husband became blind.
Wow.
And it's just very sad. And then you see people like walking around without like arms or like missing legs and stuff, and you just know that direct correlation. But I feel like that's the number one barrier, and that's why the U.S. has invested so much
Yeah, I think the U.S. invests a certain amount of millions of dollars in Laos every year
to get that
to
effort.
remove that unexploded ordnance.
And there's many Hmong people,
working.
Hmong women
Yeah.
as well, working to do
Yes,
that.
yes.
Like it's scary doing that work because it could explode.
Yeah,
So they
you-
go out there with like metal detectors, and then
and
they'll
then-
dig it out and make sure they're digging around it to take it out.
Yeah.
Um,
And they're not fully equipped to handle unexploded
No.
ordnance, but
it's
I
you
mean,
put your life
yeah,
on the line to do stuff like that.
save the life of the children and the people who's gonna farm
yeah.
there. I think Sengkuang is a good province. I think because a lot of Hmong people, a lot of opportunity. It's close to Vietnam.
True.
Like a lot of Hmong people aren't moving there, but you know, like I think for Hmong Americans,
You see
I
the
would
Hmong
want,
influence when you go
yeah,
there.
yeah, and like you know, there's
There's
Hmong
Hmong writing
schools,
everywhere.
yeah, Hmong writing, Hmong schools. Didn't you say that in Lopabang you don't see any Hmong writings, but in
Yeah.
Singkong you do? Like,
Yeah, they're like you have to get approval. Like I think there was some kind of like an org that was trying to well, they were gonna do like Hmong school for some of the kids to learn Hmong, but they got shut down real quick. And I think it's because they didn't have approval to do that from the government. Perhaps I'm not sure. But then that spurs off like stuff like, oh, the government doesn't allow people to read and write in Hmong. And so when I went
probably just
to
in that particular incident.
yeah, in that particular incident. So when I went to St. Guang, I was like, there's like Hmong everywhere. Like every sign is like followed with Hmong underneath, or it's actually no Lao and it's just Hmong.
Yeah.
So the Hmong are very big in Pontaban.
Yeah, and so I think that's opens a lot of opportunity for potential development, but that's only if you're interested in those kind of stuff. Me, I'm kind of like
well, even in Luang Prabang where I was, I mean, so many people come there to open businesses, and I'm just thinking like, you know, Hmong people could come here to open businesses too, and to support like the Hmong community out here as well.
right.
Because we have a cultural no and a cultural in with people there.
Definitely.
And I think the only thing is you need to have a local partner.
And that's what I learned traveling to Asia. Just not in Laos, it's the whole Asia. Like even in China, you know, they'll say, "Hey, you want to do business here? Find a local partner." In Laos or Vietnam, "Hey, you want to do business here? Find a local partner." And they say, you know, don't go as a sole proprietor. Don't go do it yourself. Start a company and have your company partner up with another company. Therefore, you will be safe. You know,
Yeah.
And a lot of people who go and do business there, the reason they don't succeed is because they go as themselves, and then they try to purchase property by themselves, or they say, "I'm gonna use your name, Pachia. You live there, and I'm purchase it under you." And then at the end of the day, you hold all the power, so you could just say, "Bye, Sean," and I could just, you know, say, "Oh, I'm screwed," you know.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that happens because we don't know the systems that's designed there and what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And there's a lot of red taping and a lot of top down. I think in Laos
That's
and
kind of the
Asia,
barrier, yeah.
it's like you have to know people from the top and then you work your way down. You can't work your way from the bottom and go up. Yeah.
Through our conversation, I feel like we've been talking about things that we learned that kind of like broke the own biases we had. Like, what are some things that you think most Hmong Americans don't know that they should know about the Hmong in Laos or about Laos as a country?
I think, you know, anywhere in the world, I'm an opportunist, right? So I look at every challenge, every hardship as an improve and a possibility to improve on it. And so, you know, when I went to Laos, I looked at it like that. I didn't look at it as being like a, you know, one party government, and you know it's not fully functional, or the country's not really succeeding, or it's not being it's not a developed nation yet. You know, I look at, you know, who's in place, what they're doing, and you learn how can I help? How can I be a part of this to help them? Or, you know, how do I observe and appreciate what they're doing, or just to help from a humane standpoint, you know, like how can I help Hmong people or average Lao Americans here succeed? And I think, you know, for Hmong people, because I'm Hmong, what I learned is that, you know, Laos has opened up a lot of opportunities for some Hmong people to succeed politically. You know, I think just last year, right, 2020, I think 2 years ago, in 2020, you know, one of the vice president of Laos right now is a Hmong woman. That's like the Kamala Harris of the United States. You know, her name is Paniat Tatu, right? And Nimong but Tatu is her father's name. So she's Paniat Tatu. And, you know, what's really interesting, too, is that there's also a Hmong guy who is the president of the Congress. And so, you know, there's a Congress in Laos, and they discuss policy and do all that. And the president of that Congress is a Hmong guy called Jaher. Yeah, and so it's like, wow, that's the Nancy Pelosi of the United States. So it's like, wow, like you would never think. I would think Hmong people would succeed in government here further than they would overseas or anywhere else in the world, to learn that they have succeeded, that there's somebody in that high of a position in that country is something we should be proud of.
It's quite empowering though,
Yeah,
because I think growing up we don't really know our history or know where we come from, because again, like, we have one line in a history book, and we can't necessarily rely on people's individual, like, parents or grandparents to know all these things to tell us either. So, like, learning about stuff like this, it makes you feel better as a Hmong person, right? Because you grow up feeling so belittled often. And so you grow up learning these, or when you get to learn these things, it's just like, wow, I can have a completely different perspective on who I am and who I want to be. So we should work towards a world where it doesn't necessarily have to be empowering, because we already are empowered. Yeah.
And I think
that's the aspiration.
I think that's what piques my interest, is that, like, I love traveling because I love learning about people. I love learning about what Hmong people have done otherwhere in the United States, or not United States, in the world, because I'm a history major in college, and, back then I would just hit the books, hit the archives, hit the, and trying to find anything Hmong, and when you find something in Chinese that's about Hmong people, you're so excited, in Vietnamese and Laos, and, our history has been there. We've been, involved in a lot of things, and, we hardly get to talk about it, or we hardly get to.
We got to do an episode on
look
deep
at it.
dive
Yeah.
at Hmong history. I think there's a lot of really.
And how do we apply that to world history? Like,
sure.
like a lot of minor details that Hmong people, we're like, people say, oh, it's a separate Hmong only incident, but it plays a larger role into changing the world.
We've always, and I feel like a lot of this stuff just makes me think about, like, how important it is for us to also, like, integrate ourselves and our experiences more into what's happening around us, right? Sometimes we get kind of like tunnel vision, and we don't get to do that. So traveling, in a sense, has helped me do that.
Yeah, I think for me too. I think like I said before, it's a very humbling experience, and it's a privilege. Like, it really is a privilege. Like, it's not cheap. Like, I wouldn't just recommend somebody to do it. But it's a very, very humbling experience where you get to interact with people, learn from a different perspective, somebody who don't have the same point of view as you.
Sure.
Yeah, but these are just the positive stuff that we've seen in Laos. Any, like, negative takeaway or anything you see, you're like, this should not be happening here.
Hmong-ish is a podcast that is produced by Hmong American Media, also sponsored by the Hope Center and Culture Through Cloth. And we're so happy that you all kind of tuned in today.
Yes, and we look forward for you to join us next time. Shoot us any questions or comments that you would like us to address or answer, or just, talk about.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.